So Helen, what drew you to the world of policy and advocacy in the early days of your career?
A reporter once asked me this from the National Journal, and I said, oh, a lot of my friends' parents were active in the labor movement. One of my heroes was the first president of the United Auto Workers, Walter Reuther, was very progressive. And then I stood back and I said, wait a minute. It was really my parents. My mother was quite quirky, big surprise, and she taught in what we then called the inner city, cared very much about low-income children. And when I gave her eulogy, I remember reading from a letter where she was talking about a lecture she was going to about H. Rap Brown. But she cared deeply and was totally open. My dad came from Germany in 1939 and spent a lot of time making packages for people who were still in Europe, including his brother, who was a doctor in Poland. So it was very much a part of our family. I grew up hearing stories about the Holocaust and how you had to do right. And my mother went to college with Walter Reuther in the 30s, which was a hotbed of progressivism, I guess for some people would say communism. But a lot of my friends' families worked for the labor movement, and he was a hero. He didn't want to bargain for health insurance because he thought we should have national health insurance.
So we heard from Charlotte about mentors, and she said one of her mentors was you. And I'm sure she's not the only one, because you are also one of my mentors, and probably a mentor to many in this room as well. So I'm curious to hear, who were your best mentors along the way, and how did they help shape your approach to influencing policy?
I think all of us who worked in the early years at the Children's Defense Fund might say Marian Wright Edelman. We learned so much from her and from being there. We first learned that you had to work and get along with and respect all types of people to make change. From people like Andy Young and, well, who we called Ms. Height, who was the head of the National Council of Negro Women, and Coretta Scott King, to business people and members of the Junior League, to low-income parents, to people like Sophia Harris, who created Focal, a group that supported African-American low-income child care providers and low-income women in Alabama. You had to really be able to work with and be pals with a wide range of people. You had to have the data and the facts to make your case, but you also had to organize and mobilize. Marianne actually blamed us when Ronald Reagan won because we hadn't mobilized the country. But you had to, you couldn't just have facts. You had to have stories. All your testimony had to have stories. You had to be tenacious. You could never give up. You had to try everything. We invented gimmicks, from an ad in the Washington Post that said 484,000 Head Start children needed one good senator, and Orrin Hatch's staff called and said Orrin wanted to be the one good senator, to sending little cars to the Senate that said this car has more standards than the child care center that owns it, to having advocates across the country to make miles and miles of paper chains that stretched from the top of the Capitol to the White House to convince the Bush administration to enact the child care bill, to bringing 4-year-olds to the Hill to lobby and meet with the Senate Majority Leader, Senator Mitchell. We needed gimmicks. You needed the field. You needed to support and communicate with the field, and it was actually the child care field that made what became CCBG, it was called the ABC bill, happen. A wonderful young woman named Amy Wilkins spent 3 years sitting at her desk talking to people all around the country when we didn't have email or fax. You couldn't do this without the people who worked with young children. You had to start big. You had to have a big vision, and you didn't start with a bipartisan vision. You got your vision, and then you got your bipartisan co-sponsors. You had to know when to compromise, but money was the most important thing. When we were working on the child care bill at the end, it had taken 3 years, I went back to the office every day for a month, and as all Marian said to me was don't cut the money. That money was key, and the other thing is, don't wait for the funding. We did the child care bill, we weren't funded to do it. When I created the Emerging Leaders Program at CDF, we weren't funded to do it. Decide what you have to do and do it.